Roger. Welcome to Mastercast. I'm really excited to chat to you, another product enthusiast. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Bobby. Good to be here.
Cool, man. Well, first and foremost, we always need to find out who Roger is. Can you just give us a quick background into who Roger Norton is and kind of your product journey? Because I want to talk, obviously, today it's all about product and product management and all of that. So tell us about your journey and how you landed up where you are right now.
Sure. I have a long, twisted journey, but to keep a short version is I dropped out of university, ended up on super yachts for a while, came back, wanted to get into entrepreneurship, figured you couldn't study it, so I took a midlife retirement and paid myself the money instead, and taught myself about entrepreneurship and built a network, and I've been working in tech startups for the last about 13 years, helping build tech startups and helping them work out what it is they need. So about 2013, I took over a small dev house from a friend of mine who was building and spinning out. And we kind of crafted that into a startup studio. And a lot of what we did there was help entrepreneurs work out what it is they need to build and then have the dev and product teams to build it and take it to market. We grew the team to about 15 people at its peak and built about 50 products in 5 years. Sometimes with multiple platforms. And that first piece of helping entrepreneurs work out what it is they need to build, like what is important and how do you work out how do you validate that and what is the minimal you can build in order to deliver that. And that for me really is what product is all about. So that startup studio ended up getting acquired by one of our customers. Worked there for a couple of years as a startup, as a co-founder of the startup. And then left and have joined Founders Factory just over a year ago, and have been working as head of product there for about a year and helping us work out how do we, as a investor and venture builder, how do we go about supporting startups and how do we build teams and how do we distill product values of what's important in teams so that they can continue to be successful and effective and doing all the right things even after they leave our 6-month program. So this is technically my first role. I've had product in my title, but been building a lot of products and specifically in the African context and thinking about what works in our markets and what doesn't and where are our markets compared to first world markets and how we're catching up and where we're cutting corners and where we're lagging behind. So that's mostly what I do day to day.
Yeah, no, there's so much there that we can unpack, and I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you because I think we share quite a lot of those values and a lot of those kind of the thinking that goes into product these days. And I think one of the, I always think about the sentence, oh, I've got an app idea, I've got a business idea, and people go and do these pitch decks or whatever, and then they take it to a dev house or wherever it is, and people start building it, and then it doesn't work, and people are, why isn't this working? And I think that's where where this product thing comes in, and we've come to realize that in Africa, we're quite far behind, and I think we're moving pretty quickly, but we're evolving pretty quickly, but we've got a long way to really start grasping the understanding of what it means to be product. So I would like to know your journey of kind of realizing that, because I know we can also get into it, but you're diving into Africa and you're doing, African things as well, but kind of that experience of, you say you've been in the tech space for 15 years, when did that like aha moment happen to say, okay, hold on, it's not just about like a project management thing where you've got a waterfall approach where we actually have to go and dive into what we want to build. Can you just tell that journey and how you've seen it evolve over the last couple of years?
Yeah, so it started when I was running that startup studio, PlayLogix, and we used to just build we built a couple of projects that was exactly what the entrepreneur wants, that I knew deep down this would never take off. This is just never going to work for a whole bunch of reasons. And at one point I reached out to somebody who was a competitor of mine at the time, is a close friend now, David Campy. He was running a company called Afro Labs, which was effectively a direct competitor to PlayLogix. And we started chatting about like, what do we struggle with and what works and what doesn't work. And we started just collaborating a bit on sort of shared process. And David had this wonderful phrase called his anti-sales process, which is all the reasons he tells an entrepreneur why they're not ready to buy his software development services. And those are because they haven't spoken to enough customers. They haven't validated the business model. They haven't removed enough of those risks. And so we actually started collaborating and working together and actually documenting my anti-sales process and his anti-sales process and what was common in that. And we ended up developing a bit of a validation curriculum or process on how to validate startup ideas called the Lean Iterator, which we ended up selling to a couple of accelerators and incubator programs, mostly by chance, but through the Graduate School of Business, the Venture Incubation Program, Ellen Gray Orbis Foundation, the Launch Lab was running some of our courses. We did some work with Standard Bank and the internal innovation teams. And yeah, we kind of fell into that, and it was kind of, but that was very much the core of when I really realized, like, it doesn't help to just sell the software that you can sell. Like often that is just going to be an absolute waste of your time and the client's money. But it's far more effective to push back and validate the right things up front. And then the question is, well, what is the right thing? And how do you work out what the right thing is? And what does validation actually look like? And so that's kind of the journey that I've been on since, was it probably 2014, 2015 was when we were playing with these sort of concepts of working that out. And that's the core from it for me. And my evolution in the product space is in the last year or so, and specifically being at Founders Factory and dealing with some more of the things we're dealing with, I've kind of moved that thinking on a little bit. It's not just about building the right thing, but it's around setting up the team and the processes and the ways of work that enables us to build right things, plural. So that once we've shipped one thing, we can build the next right thing and the next right thing. And I think that's, so I talk quite a lot around product the way versus product the thing. And product the thing is the output that you deliver. Product the way is how we think about team and agile and feedback loops and communication and fast iteration and data-driven decisions and all of those principles that drive product. For me, are product the way. It's how our team communicates, how our team chooses what's important and how we determine that. And I think that in the first world, a lot of first world markets or more developed markets, they're already quite comfortably in that space with product and product leaders. That's where they're thinking around how do we build effective product teams. I think in South Africa, we're still probably 3 to 5 years behind that. And in most of the rest of Africa, I work quite a lot in Nigeria and in product groups in Nigeria, there's just so much talent and so much energy there, but they're probably 5 to 10 years behind us, depending on people and scale. And part of the tension there comes is your business executives are expecting you to deliver a Gantt chart and a timeline and a roadmap for the next 24, 36 months. They want you to write these 30-page PRD documents. And that's actually not what it's about. That's about product the thing. That's project management. That's just coordinating to deliver the thing. It's not helping us think about our team structure and our way of work. So that's my evolution has kind of gone through those steps to get to where I am, and I'm trying to infuse that in the teams and people around me.
Yeah. So again, so much to unpack there, but what is your kind of like feel? Because I mean, I know there's always this pushback, like, you know, when somebody wants that chart and that roadmap and everything like that, like actually coaching these founders, coaching these stakeholders like this, and this is not how we go about doing it. How have you had that experience? Like, what was it for you, or what has it been like?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And once again, this is actually a skill I learned at PlayLogix, and in persuading clients why you shouldn't just dive into build software. And a lot of that is, it's not about saying you can't do this, or this is how we have to do things, or this is the better way to do it. If it is better, show why it's better. Like, what does evidence doing it another way actually enable? And a lot of the time that I found is, specifically in software, there's so much ambiguity and there's so much unknown. And it helps, like, one way to address that is to say, I can't do as strict a timeline. Here's a vague timeline, but here's ranges. I don't know how this is going to take. And then ask, but why don't you know? It's like, because these things, there's huge assumptions baked in here that we could be wrong on. And it immediately shifts the conversation from a definite timelines and why aren't you hitting your timelines to a certainty conversation or uncertainty. And it helps you shift the conversation to talk about what you don't know and why running a small quick test now will help you know that, which will help you plan or estimate times better. So it's not so much pushing back to say, no, we can't do that, but it's pushing back to say, look, currently from what we know, this is going to take between 2 to 6 months. And they'll be like, that's a ridiculous time. It's like, yeah, it is ridiculous. That's why we shouldn't be doing it. But here's what makes here's what makes up that uncertainty. Like in software, we're building these invisible houses, right? We're building these invisible houses in the sky, and everyone wants you to plan everything to a T and expect you to hit it. But even people in the real world busy building physical houses where everything is known, you know the size of the bricks, you know how big the walls are, you know where the foundations are going to go, they still can't deliver on time, and because there's still unknowns that come up, and there's uncertainty inherent in that. And so by making that uncertainty clear, I've found you can shift the conversation to what actually matters instead of the deadlines, the commitments, or the hard things that they want.
Yeah. So obviously you've probably many years ago, you read the book Lean Startup, and you kind of started understanding about getting a quick feedback loop, right?
Yeah. I'll tell you, I've actually done quite a lot of consulting and workshops on the Lean Startup, but I've actually never read the book. Never read the book.
Oh, haven't you?
I've done lots of reading about it, lots of articles, perspectives, and summaries. I did a lot more research into customer discovery by Steve Blank, and I actually find that a slightly more robust mechanism. The Lean Startup is actually a pretty flimsy concept. It's very lightweight, incredibly, actually. It's just create tight feedback loops, create a build, measure, learn, ship quickly, learn fast.
That's what it is.
Whereas customer development speaks a lot more around the stages of what your focus and priority is at that point. And I mean, Steve Blank was the guy who came up with the phrase pivot, of when you move from customer discovery to customer validation. If you can't validate customers, if you can't get customers to actually use the one from the customers that you identified up front, then you go through a pivot. And when you pivot, you can only change one of three things. You can change the delivery mechanism, the product, or the customer. Those are the only three levers you have. Yeah. So if it's not working, are you going to sell the same thing to a different product in the same way? Are you going to change the product you're selling to the same customer in the same way? Or are you going to sell the same product to the same customer, but in a different way? Do you move to the Netflix, like a rental model instead of a buy up front model? Do you change the way it's paid? Do you change it to a monthly licensing or a SaaS model? Or there's so many ways in delivery that you can shift. And when you're pivoting, those are the three levers you really have. And so when you start looking at that, and then you look at customer creation and customer and company creation as sort of the later two stages, like that is actually a far more robust framework in which to validate and explore ideas in, actually. The Lean Startup is really just that loop. And once you get that, there's not a hell of a lot more.
Yeah, quite interesting. I like that. So something we've been talking about on this podcast was being product led, or having the value, being customer centric. And there's your 3 C's. Do you want to just tell us what your 3 C's are?
Yeah. So I'm a firm believer in focusing on principles, not focusing on tools. And the analogy I like to use is when you learn to dance, you're learning the waltz, you're learning the rumba or the jive or whatever it is, you learn the steps that you have to move in order to do that. But the point is not to be able to do the rumba or the jive. The point is to be able to move to the music. It's for most of us, for most companies, there's certain cases where it's an outlier, and that's different if you want to compete, sure. But the point of learning the moves is that you learn the mechanics of it, that you can get to a point where you can start twisting and teasing that. But I think so many people look at product and they learn, I need to use Scrum, or I need to use Kanban. And those are just the dance moves. That's not dancing to the music. And so when you focus on the principles behind why we're trying to do those things, that's the rhythm, that's the beat, that's the music that you're actually trying to dance to. And so what I find is by focusing on those things, you can then choose which dance moves are going to help you do that best in that situation.
True. Oh, it's so true, man. Oh.
And so the first layer of like the principles is like tight feedback loops, cross-functional teams, customer interactions, experimental mindset, all those sorts of things that we kind of inherently know. But behind those are my 3 C's, which is customer centricity, communication, and collaboration. And that for me is what product is all about. And being product-led, product the way, and being driven by that is by embracing those 3 principles. And whichever dance moves you choose for your situation and your company and your team will differ. But the reason you choose the dance moves is how you can best dance to the music. And that's the important thing that I think so many people miss when they get stuck on the tools and not actually reflecting on what really matters, which is customer centricity, communication, and collaboration.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So the company that you work for, what's it called again?
Founders Factory Africa.
Now, you guys do a lot of different startups that come in, right? Constantly.
Yeah.
How many different ways, how many different dances are you learning? Because I keep telling that to every team that I go into. You can't, like you said, you can't say, yes, Scrum, so we'll do it like this, 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 and this. You got to like kind of figure out the team, you got to figure out the project, got to understand the stakeholders and figure out what that team's rhythm is. I mean, you must do that on a regular basis where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's more a conversation of what's going to work for you and what you need. A great example of that is product road mapping. Everyone wants a product roadmap. Like, help us do a create a product strategy and do a product roadmap. And how I normally start those conversations is I run a workshop and I say, well, like, these are the different types of product roadmaps you can do. You can do flight levels. You can do now, next, later, like the prod pad models like this. You can do Gantt charts and structure, like waterfall model. We have a technique that actually David Campy developed around iteration design, which is help when an entrepreneur is stuck with a certain idea in their mind and they're struggling to work out smaller steps, like smaller iterations in order to get to where you're trying to get to. And it's a whole technique and a workshop and approach that we have towards that. So the first thing I do is I lay these all out and say, which one of these is going to be most effective in your situation? Like, which one, do you have a company culture where you are very timeline and you are very corporate, you're dealing with corporates in which you do need the timelines and the waterfall and the Gantt charts because you need to integrate with banks.
You need approvals.
Like, you can't just be flexible and have no timelines and deadlines for them because that's just not going to work for your customers. So it's then looking at this toolbox saying which one of these is going to be most effective, which tool do we want to pick up today to fix 100%. The problem that we've got. And that's kind of how I start those conversations. So it's less about me diagnosing and say, oh, you should use this tool, or this is my favorite tool. It's more about what do you actually need? What are we trying to solve for? And which of these are going to help us do that most effectively? And often it means combining them. So I love combining, I love the way like prod pans, the now, next, later model, the lean product roadmap works with experimentation and hypotheses and tracking experiments against an initiative. And only once you think you've proven it, then you move on to the next one. But often like flight plans or flight levels, help break out sort of high level milestones and roadmaps. And so often combining those two is work out what those big stones are. And then let's run little experiments on how we prioritize and how we can actually deliver those. So then it's kind of combining 2 or 3 of those flavors, depending on the team or the structure. So the last company I worked with, that's where we ended up. The one before that was much more structured. And so it depends. And I don't like a particular tool. I prefer, let's identify the principles and let's look at the toolbox to see which one's going to work best.
Yeah. So when we talk about like, South Africa being behind or Nigeria being behind, right? We talk about like how everyone got that buzzword Agile. Let's be Agile. And what is Agile? Okay, we're going to do Scrum, which means we do sprints, we do daily stand-ups, and we do these things. My journey has been not to be that way, but to have an Agile mindset, to say, okay, cool, I'm going to adapt to change depending on the situation and the product and I think that for me is the biggest like kind of aha moment that happened is, don't just fit into this concept like these stiffness, because it's also stiff in its way if you're going to do pure Scrum, right? But totally. It's the mindset.
If you're going to dance the rumba, there's only one way to dance the rumba.
Yeah.
If your music isn't rumba, then it's probably not going to be a good fit. Yeah. So,
but that's why I asked you about, talking to clients and stuff and having that, trying to teach them that this is the methodologies and the thinking and the principles that we're going to use, because it's foreign in the old style of doing projects. It is that waterfall approach with a timeline and a deliverable date.
Yeah, but often when you explain that, so one of the reasons I believe why product is the latest sort of iteration of different thinking and methodologies, and product has very much come from design or agile and design thinking and a bit of lean startup and organizational design. And back in the day it was XP, and all of these different approaches are building on prior approaches, and some work better in different situations. And I think the product discipline or the product approach, specifically with software, building software products, is much more effective purely because you embrace those 3 C's, the customer centricity, communication, and collaboration, because a company that is product centric is one that is focusing more on those things. They're focusing on, and a lot of what a product person's role is kind of that sits across most other departments or vertical departments.
Exactly.
But product kind of sits across all of those. You get product managers in the dev team, you get product designers in the design team, you get product operations, product strategy. Like there's so many that sits all across the organization. And the reason product is this unique mix is because it breaks down those silos and it brings together communication and collaboration internally 100%. And externally. And it creates customer centricity at the center of what every team does. And historically, most teams and departments haven't done that effectively. And so the companies that do embrace product embrace those 3 things more and are therefore more effective at solving customers' problem, making increasing bottom line and making more revenue. And so that's kind of why I believe product is the new hot trend and is the new craze, but it's really so because thinking about organization design around customer centricity and working more effectively to break down silos is always going to win, right? Like in hindsight, you're like, why weren't we doing this earlier?
Exactly. Oh, dude, exactly. And you think about those 3, they're not just 3 C's, they're not just 3 words. If you go, we could literally spend an hour talking just about collaboration. I mean, I worked at companies where it was just siloed and people started realizing, oh, but we are actually talking to the same users, even though you're in sales and I'm in support, but hold on, actually it's the same people. So you've got collaboration, being customer centric, like actually saying who's paying for this and what is value for them. Communication, I think, is the other one, right? I mean, it's just, it's not just words. And I think for people that are watching this, don't just say, oh, communication. No, go and actually break down what you're actually trying to tell people here.
Yeah, communication is like, are we communicating with our customers? Are we speaking to our customers face to face?
Yeah.
How are we sharing information internally in a team? One of the things that I see so often in startup teams that are often a little bit overwhelmed is everyone just head down and just doing their little thing. But one of the most valuable things you can do is actually just information radiation, which is have a Slack channel or public Slack channels where you can just post public updates and radiate the information of what you're doing through the organization. It doesn't have to be a specific meeting or a specific stand-up or an update.
I like that.
But let everyone know, kind of just the information just permeates the organization and people kind of, oh, hold on, you guys are having a problem with that. Oh, there's that big deadline coming up. What I'm doing is going to be a blocker for that. I better flag that.
Yes. And
you don't need a formal communication lines. There's lots of informal ways of doing that. Creating tight feedback loops of going back and checking whether what you've actually done, what you actually shipped, achieved what you thought it would, and letting the company know whether or not that was true.
100%.
So that you can think, for the next feature you're building, is this actually going to be effective, or how can I make this more effective?
That's the problem, right? People just get into this frame of mind of next, go. And actually, are we reflecting? Are we actually doing those feedback loops? Are we doing retros to understand, like you said, I actually had a manager that taught me that, and we weren't agile, it wasn't product, anything like that. But he said, when you do a project, when you go into something, think about the needle you want to move. Make sure you understand that needle before you go into it so that you can monitor it as you start building and as you start doing. And it's so true.
Have a hypothesis, right? You can't run an experiment if you don't have a hypothesis. Otherwise, it's just doing stuff, right? You've got to actually define the hypothesis and the measurement criteria up front. Otherwise, what are the results anyway?
That's what I enjoy about the move and where things are going and why. And I was actually talking to a friend that I hadn't seen in like, I don't know how many years. She was saying to me just like how incredible it is that everyone's moving to product, everyone's becoming a product manager, and we're all like developing, but no one's actually like got those fundamentals below, and they're all discovering. And it's quite an interesting time if I think about it. Hey, like where we're coming, where we're going with this whole philosophy.
Well, absolutely, but I think companies are inherently starting to realize that the ones that are product focused or product led are more effective because you have those feedback loops and you have the customer at the main role of a product manager in a dev team, in my opinion, is to keep the customer at the heart of the customer's priorities so that the developers are building towards that. And companies that do that are just going to perform better. You're going to solve problems better. You're going to make more revenue. You're going to share information and respond faster. And specifically as the world starts accelerating and the businesses are accelerating, the solutions are accelerating, customer expectations are accelerating. The companies that can't move fast enough, that aren't being product-led, that aren't focused on customer centricity and how the teams work more effectively together, are going to be left behind. And it starts becoming pretty obvious which ones can stay up with momentum, but eventually going to drop off, and which ones are actually driving and moving a market forward. And that's, I think, at the moment, product is the edge. I love to remind myself that it won't always be. There will be something beyond that, and you need to also be aware of what's next, and how do we shift to, maybe it's an organizational design, or maybe it's something beyond that. But as we kind of, design started as this very small thing, and then became design thinking and became very big, and now it's become very narrow and very, you have UX and UI and copy and information architecture, like there's all like different divisions now again. And product is very much at that phase where it's like, oh, it's the new hot thing, like everyone wants to be a designer, everyone wants to be in product. But we need to watch out, like when that starts distilling into formal silos, like it's going to start slowing down, and then we need to look for like what is the trend, or what is the principles we need to be embracing.
One of the things I fear on that note, one of the things I fear in the whole product and being a product manager at this time is, because just as we've been discussing about how product actually covers all, parts of the company, and actually, it's product ops, and then, the product manager needs to know it all, right? And my fear is that there's going to be this expectation that a product manager will understand all of those things, and we spread them too thin. Because I definitely have felt that, like where you're busy in something, and because you're the product manager, you should have your finger on the pulse on all of these things, and it's very difficult to do it. So that's my fear with all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a diagram that I share with our startups that's split from the it comes from our Bjorn Eriksson. I'm one of the founders of Product Pro Conference. He says it's like product is the intersection of those three circles. And for me, it's a slight modification of that, is that your product strategy is at the center of your business strategy, your go-to-market or growth strategy, and your technical strategy. And it's really, product is where those three overlap. But the important thing for me in that diagram is it's not another circle. It's not another department. It's the intersection of those things. And I think there's a careful balance with product managers to take like responsibility versus accountability. Like we're accountable for making sure those things need to happen, but that doesn't mean we need to do all those things. So where you find yourself being a bottleneck with a whole bunch of information coming in, and you're the one who's like has to communicate everything to everyone, how do you extract yourself from that? How do you allow the teams to just communicate directly, or communicate into a public channel? Your responsibility, your accountability is to make sure that communication happens.
That it happens.
It doesn't have to happen through you. And that's where I think the shift needs to come, and where we need to move, and moving from just being a product manager of like coordinating, and which is just one sort of level above project management or project delivery. Is moving towards how do I design the team and the systems so that I don't need to be involved in anything, but making sure that everything still happens. And that's the thing, is like, how do we train our dev teams to wear the customer hat so that we don't need to be in those meetings? We're not the only ones in those meetings wearing that hat. When we are the bottleneck, that's always going to be the problem. And the question is then, how are we building systems? And that's why for me, I had a Twitter conversation the other day with someone, and they were saying, oh, my parents still think I'm in IT, even though like product is about as far as you get from that.
Was it me that had that conversation with you? Because I can definitely resonate.
About that comment. But I was like, but actually, we are probably closer to ICT, information communication technology, than anything else before, than the developers. Like, we are in the business of information communication around to build technologies and through technologies. Like, that is the role of the product manager. It's, are we sharing information? Are we working out what information is important? Are we like, how do we communicate that to the teams? How is the team communicating? And then what is the technology like that we use to enable that and automate that so that we're not the bottleneck? And that's really, we are in the ICT business, like in the industry. That is fundamentally the description of what I believe product is it's more around the people and product the way, and the teams and communication and things. And when you get that right, the rest of the stuff starts sorting itself out. And that's been a shift for me in the last little while. And I think I believe that's where product, when I say like product in South Africa, when Africa is generally behind the first world, I think that's the focus, or the shift in priorities that we need to start embracing that we haven't yet. As a step.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, we could probably talk for hours, clearly. Time has flown by, but I have one last question. I've warned you that it's coming. If you could recommend a book for the viewers or the listeners to read, what would it be? One book. Can't be your book. Plug in. Roger's written a book.
I don't recommend my book. I wrote it about 10 years ago and it's very outdated. I'm actually not a very big reader. I don't even read the Lean Startup. But I think there is so much really great information out there. So I wouldn't recommend a book, but I would definitely recommend blogs. Follow a bunch of smart people. Follow a bunch of like, I have a really great Twitter following that I've been curating. Follow guys like Gibson Biddle, puts out some really great content and really great articles, a lot of it for free. My top tip for anybody wanting to get into product or learn product or understand product, pay the $15 a month and sign up to Lenny's newsletter.
I've heard of it, yeah.
He's an ex-product guy from, I think it was Google or Airbnb, one of the big things, but it's actually less about him now. There's a community of about 6,000 of the top product people in the world where you can ask a question and anybody asks a question and people respond to it. If you sign up to Lenny's newsletter, I think it's every second or every third one is actually just literally copy pastes from the Slack channel. And if you're a paid member, you get access to his Slack channel that you can sign up for. And that kind of community is going to give you way more information than any book ever would. Jana Basso with Podpad, they have a bunch of really great articles on thinking about product and how to communicate and how to sell product into an organization. Like, don't read a book, go read all of those things.
I get FOMO sometimes where I want to read all these blogs, but also want to read this book, and I also want to watch that podcast and also want to watch that YouTube video. But there's a lot out there for people.
I generally find most books you can summarize in a good, concise blog post and get exactly the same amount out and move on with your life.
Yeah.
Read the blog post twice or 3 times if you want.
Cool. But Roger, it's been fantastic having you on. I've really enjoyed it, and probably have you back on sometime because clearly we share the passion in product. But thank you very much for your time. It's been great. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Bobby. Happy to be here. And we can chat anytime.
Awesome. All right. Cheers, everyone.